This is the Living Mandala podcast. And of course, the Living Mandala of the Planet series continues with Rachel Ruth Tate. This series is coming to an end. There's the Pluto episode, and then there's a closing episode. And then we're going to take about, a month break before the next series starts. The next guest is not able to meet with me for some time, and so I'm going to be patient. But in the interim, I'm considering doing a standalone podcast episode about why I'm even studying the correspondences. So, I haven't really gotten into that. So stick around for the next few weeks. It's highly likely I will do a standalone episode on sort of why I'm studying the correspondences. We did the chakras, we did the colors, just now kind of wrapping up the planets. The next set of correspondences is also going to be super interesting. But why study the correspondences? Like, who cares? So anyway, stay tuned. I've got my reasons. Anyway, either way, stick around after the bell for a little bit more information about where to find the Plutonian places in your house and home. This is the Living Mandala podcast. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. My name is Ara. Okay, and the Living Mandala of the Planets podcast series continues, and we are at Pluto. Here we are. Yes. I'm joined by Rachel Ruth Tate. We are here in Waco, recording in a very cool co-working space and downtown Waco. And I've been like biting my nails about the Pluto episode since I even hatched the idea about doing this podcast series, because Pluto is really far away. It's really weird. Is it even a planet? I mean, there's a lot going on with Pluto. Pluto takes 248 years to make a full circuit of the zodiac. But it's got a weird orbit, and it comes in the orbit of Neptune, and then it goes out of the orbit of Neptune, and it doesn't really have a steady presence in the sense of, predictability. Some signs it can be 15 years, and other signs it can be, 20 some odd years. It varies. It was calculated, I was kind of digging around on the internet and in resources about Pluto, and Planet X was calculated in the 1840s, but not seen officially by telescope until 1930. So it has an elusive nature to it. It is very distant. Of course, the name Pluto is from the Roman god of the underworld. You can also think about Hades. That's another equivalency. Pluto is one of the 6 surviving children of Saturn. Gosh, there's a whole complicated group out there with fathers and relationships and children. Again, Roman mythology, Pluto is the god of the underworld, who is extremely wealthy. There's all kinds of fascinating stories that go back to Pluto. Let's see, what else could I say about it? I guess just talk to us a little bit about Pluto, because I think a lot of the Pluto mythology is going to come out naturally in the discussion of Pluto and how it sort of manifests in astrology.
Everything that you shared is demonstrative of the archetype of Pluto. That subtle, hidden, potentially unknown nature, right? Like the idea that it was theorized and called Planet X is very Plutonic. The idea of, so the definition of a planet is a body which has cleared its orbit of all other bodies that are, surrounding it. Because it enters Neptune's orbit, it doesn't quite meet the definition, but we don't know if it's a dwarf planet, if we want to call it an asteroid, and that very lack of consensus and that sort of opaque nature. Some of us learned that Pluto was a planet, and now kids are learning it's not a planet. And there's even sort of disagreement in the this is not a planet camp as to what it is. All of that is so Pluto. Pluto is about all that which is hidden. And when we think about the god of the underworld, right, Hades or Pluto, all of that realm was hidden from all of the gods on Olympus. They were not able, other than Mercury or Hermes, none of them were able to journey down there to that realm. So it was complete dominion, and it included everything that wasn't embodied on Earth or that wasn't immortal on Olympus. So it's this very large soul swath of things that have not been embodied or that were embodied and are not embodied. I mean, the idea of what is down there with Hades and Persephone is in and of itself a very Plutonic thing. We associate Pluto in modern times with both power and fear. And we as humans fear the powerful unknown. And most of all things are unknown, almost like dark matter, right? That undergirds the entirety of the universe, we think. But we have no idea what it is.
But we don't know.
Same thing with gravity. There's a theoretical graviton, but we don't actually understand the forces which keep everything in the structure in which it is currently suspended. And again, this is so Pluto. I love that you brought up the wealth as well, because Pluto is one of those planets which confers power. And wealth is in and of itself, in this earthly fashion, power. So just as an example, and I'm sure that every astrologer has heard this example, Bill Gates has a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in his second house.
Oh.
So wealth comes with Pluto in many different ways. So does preferment, but also with Pluto comes the removal of that favor, right? So why is one king made and one king toppled? We can kind of confer that on Pluto.
Wow. Pluto, our teacher, Austin, I like what he said I heard him say this, that Pluto's like it's coming in on the Z-axis. It just comes out of it's just burning a hole through the back of the canvas if you're looking at anything 2D.
In modern astrology, they give it rulership of Scorpio.
Right. Well, there you go.
Which is Mars's sign in traditional Hellenistic astrology. And I'm going to give the same answer as I gave with Uranus and Neptune. There is a sympathicum with Pluto and Scorpio. I would almost call it the same sort of nature as exaltation. Pluto likes being in Scorpio because Scorpio is all about the hidden. Scorpio is all about its generative and regenerative, and it deals with the excretory system. So Scorpio rules the genitals, reproductive system, and the excretory system. And Pluto is responsible for transformation of things, right? That's the power of alchemy. It's responsible for creation and destruction, which are inextricable from each other, and for the unknown, which is yet to be produced. If that makes any sense, it's kind of the planet to me that, like you said, burning the hole in the canvas, because there is something else powerful that needs to come through and be witnessed, and that canvas is changing for.
Wow. Yeah, precisely. So in terms of the chakras, it's really hard to say. I have down, the base or root, but honestly, like maybe it's like somewhere between the first and second, that it's like the, themes of birth and rebirth, death and birth and rebirth and transformation. And all I can think about for some reason is pooping.
And we in the excretory system.
So it's hard to say. Pluto's slippery like that. There's not a traditional correspondence in alchemy, just like Uranus and Neptune, but there is plutonium, number 94 on the periodic table of elements. First synthesized in 1941, too unstable to stand alone, but boy, it makes great bombs, doesn't it?
Oh, it makes a big boom. And actually, I love the idea of Pluto being between the first and second chakras. I also want to throw in there that I feel like Pluto is part of the theorized chakras beneath the feet, right?
Those
nice chakras which connect us to the earth in the way that we cannot see, that almost infrared kind of action. And it feels as if plutonium fits there, as in plutonium bombs change the structure of the earth beneath the feet. They literally irradiate it. And so it is completely different than when this bomb was dropped. Uranium does a similar thing, but it's got a shorter half-life.
Right. Wow, that's genius. Yeah, I change my correspondence to the theoretical chakras beneath the feet. My God, that's perfect. The underworld,
As it were, ashes, right? Dust to dust. Like, is the material of creation not also beneath the feet?
right?
We walk on the ancestors that we bury beneath the feet.
It's true. It's true. In terms of the runes, I would correspond it to two different runes. The first would be Perthro. It's all about fate and the unknown, which feels very Plutonian. The other rune that I would associate with it is the blank rune, which in the world of runes, is it even a rune? Resonates with, is it even a planet? With Pluto, the blank rune is also known as the rune of Odin, and it's a blank rune, and it basically is just like wiping the slate clean. So if you believe in that rune and you consider it one of the runes, if it's in a casting, and it comes up in a casting, you basically just start over. You rebirth the cast and you keep moving. But there's an entire school of thought that it's not actually a rune, that it was, just a wise extra stone created when the other stones were created in case you lost a rune. Then you could carve a new rune and still have a complete set. So is it a rune? Is it not a rune? Is it a planet? Is it not? I don't know. The blank rune, Odin's rune, also seems to ring true for Pluto. Again, no correspondence in the traditional tarot, as has been the case with Uranus and Neptune, unless you, Rachel, or unless a listener or friend of mine has a good Pluto tarot card.
I've always liked to correspond Pluto with death.
Oh,
Or with that devil, even though I know those are not the traditional correspondence.
But Hades kind of has a devil vibe.
Yeah, but those cards are feared. And they're often, when you pull them up in a reading, it's like an immediate, like, arresting of
like, oh shit.
Yes. We don't want to see death or the devil, but those two are also, and they are part of the human paradigm, and we can't take them away. We can't remove those symbolisms. And I think that Pluto itself, we can't remove its influence, despite our inability to agree upon what it even is.
Wow. Okay. Excellent tarot suggestions. Death and the devil.
And in a very Plutonic sense, I'm going to completely change the yoga pose, which I thought I was going to present.
Okay.
And I will say that the only pose that I could truly present and with confidence is Shavasana corpse pose.
Oh, good one. Mm-hmm.
Because it's in that particular state which oftentimes we have the most impactful meditations. And it ends every single class, predominantly, that we take, like death ends every life which is lived. But it's also considered to be the most difficult, challenging, and advanced pose. And that meditation is the most difficult and challenging part of yoga. Of the 8 limbs, like 4 of them are about meditation itself.
Wow, good point. Well, and then what do you do after corpse pose? But you wiggle your fingers, your toes, you roll onto your side into a fetal position, and you slowly rise.
Reborn.
You are reborn. Every class. So beautiful. Thank you. That's such a great suggestion for the Pluto yoga pose. In terms of, some sort of meditation or activity that you can do to connect with Pluto, I was thinking about suggesting a breathwork, like a proper rebirthing session by a trained facilitator. I did this once. It was a Leonard Orr trained breathwork facilitator. So it's got a very specific sort of protocol. He studied with, or was, what's the word? I'm going to have to edit this out. What is the word? Yeah, it's escaping me. Not a colleague. Yes, Groff was a colleague. My God, of Leonard Orr, and so it's not exactly holotropic breath work like the Groff method, but it's an adjacent method, and it's like with the intention of rebirth. It's a fascinating process where you essentially hyperventilate yourself and go into an altered state, and you're kind of reborn. Highly recommend it. The last time I did it was in 2016. I feel inspired to do another one now that I'm talking about it. And there are some facilitators in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that, if you were interested in doing a proper rebirth session with breath work, I could definitely point you in a direction and you could go from there. So that would be my suggestion. What else do you have to say about Pluto?
Well, per your suggestion just now, I want to also add that I myself have been through a rebirth ceremony, but it was a water rebirth. In which I was essentially you reenact the process of birth in the water where the facilitator is physically moving you. Love it. Through the processes of what it would be like to go through a canal. And they're manipulating your body in the water, and the idea that breathwork is involved as well. The idea is that you come out of the experience just like you came out of the womb, and maybe you can even access some memories. Because our own birth stories oftentimes are responsible for the trauma in which we find ourselves enmeshed throughout life, and that the trauma of birth is relatively intense for the mother, right, as well.
Yes.
But it's also for the child. So if you're somebody who had that cord wrapped around, or emergency C-section, or, some born in some wild circumstance, that can often be reflected in the nature of life. And I find that rebirth allows us to take more conscious control. Pluto's about control too. More conscious control of our own transformation.
Love it. Love it. Great suggestion. I want a recommendation on to do that. Maybe I'll try that. Again, we talked about it in the Neptune episode. We'll try anything with Neptune and Sagittarius people. And today I would be remiss if I did not mention, I know this episode is going to air sometime in the summer, like in July. But we are recording this on my daughter's birthday. So it is her day of birth, but it's a day that I gave birth. So it's the moment I became a mother was on this day. She's 25. So she's a grown woman, and I love her dearly. And that's been one of the most transformative things in my life was to give birth, to be born first, but then also giving birth and becoming a mother and then birthing my son a few years later. So happy birthday, Ava. All right. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. Hey, it's me again. Thanks for sticking around after the bell. Fascinating episode, fascinating planet. Again, is it a planet? Pluto. So the Plutonian areas of the home. It's hard to say. Pluto is all about transformation. And so I would say the Plutonian areas of the home would be, how life shifts when you get a dog or a cat or a new baby's born or you get a new roommate or you get married and like everything gets turned on its head because there's this new being that's in your house and home. And I would say that that's the Plutonian area of the home. It's just this great unknown of what life is going to be like with this other person or with this other animal. So I would label the Plutonian areas of the home, these major life transformations that alter forever, how you live. So think about it. When you get a new roommate, you've got to navigate, the kitchen, you've got to navigate certain community parts of the home. You may not sort of keep house the same way when you get, it's the same thing when you get married. There's all this stuff then you have to navigate, the bills. It's collaborative. Sometimes it goes great. Sometimes it doesn't. And then, of course, animals. Having a cat box added to the mix is always kind of plutonium, if you know what I mean. So that's what I would say is that anytime you've got a radical transformation in terms of, the dynamics in a home, that's where Pluto comes in. It's all the stuff you don't know that you don't know about what it's going to be like, and navigating and charting a new course forward. So I don't know if you agree with me. Cool. If you've got another idea of where the plutonium, I'm not quite sure how to say that, part of the house is, I'd love to hear about it. You can always reach me through the contact page. If you're interested in any of my services, space clearing, organizational support, feng shui consultations, I can also be reached there. Give me a holler. It'd be great to hear from you. You've been listening to the Living Mandala podcast.